big woods, public land. There's no deer 100% nocturnal. What's going on here in Pennsylvania? We have an antler restriction. We saw a spike, any horns at all, like big deal, like anything with antlers, jaw dropping. Some of the bucks that we started to see.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Bows, Bros, and Bucks podcast. Today we have Steve Sherk Jr. on the podcast. This is episode number 6, so we'll hop right into it.
He's an awesome, super well-known tracker and basically public land slayer in the woods of Pennsylvania. So we're going to get him introducing himself, and then we'll move forward in the podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for having me. So most people know me because I'm a hunting guide, and a lot of people follow me on social media. I'm a hunting guide on public land in northern Pennsylvania. I've been doing it for, around 10 years now or so. The years fly by. I kind of quit counting after a while, but I've been doing it, quite a while. And I have just, I've met a lot of people, and especially a lot through like social media and that. So I think that's how, most of the people know me and follow me. I only do whitetail hunting, mainly bow hunting throughout the rut, all big woods, public land, mountain type terrain. So there's a huge interest in this part of the country with that style of hunting. So it seems like, a lot of people, are always looking to listen to anyone that knows anything about, mountain deer, public land. So feel free to pick my brain as much as you want. I just got to pick up my son around 2:00 from school. Other than that, though, I'm good to go.
Yeah, I'm a little poor, so I don't have the special Zoom link, so I think it only lasts like 30 minutes or something. But we'll figure it out. I don't have the pro version or whatever.
No problem.
Yeah, so I've known about him and watched his videos for quite a long time, and learned a lot of the things about scrapes and basically shed hunting from him. So I grew up in New Hampshire, if you don't know, Steve. So I have a similar perspective. We don't have as many deer here as Pennsylvania, but we definitely have mountain laurel in that big woods environment. So I definitely feel you on that standpoint. One of the first questions that I wanted to ask is, what do you tell people when they ask you, what do you do once you spook a big buck, and especially a mature buck in the big woods?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people overthink that situation and they get too worried, especially on public land. I hunt a lot of national forest, and there's just a lot of human activity out there as it is. There's a lot of hiking, and there's some ATV riding in places, and fishing, and forest rangers everywhere. So these deer are somewhat used to, human pressure, human activity. But I will say, like, a mature buck does eventually have a sense that he's being hunted versus like, okay, that guy just passes through here every now and then, or, doing his job as a forest ranger. But a one-time scenario usually doesn't have a big effect. But, if you don't play your cards right and keep pressuring a deer, and you're not smart about it, then you're definitely gonna push him to either a new pattern or a completely new area.
For sure. And that definitely plays into that. Usually what I see here is that on public land, the bucks will not necessarily just have one bed.
Yep.
Maybe during the summer, they might bed in the bachelor group all in the same spot, spread out. But then the mature bucks tend to want to be alone, and they'll bed in several different beds. Do you find that too as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And even in the summer, in the big woods, they don't tend to, any time of year, they rarely don't bed in the same exact bed. They have favorite beds that, to my knowledge, I think some bucks, and just kind of a wide guess, but they might bed in the same bed a few different times a week, or maybe a little bit more than that. Other than that, though, they have their areas. Some bucks are a little more nomadic. They'll maybe have like a square mile range, and they'll have different bedding areas all throughout that range with, depending on what the weather might be, wind, human activity, food sources, you name it. Like Some bucks are a little bit more unpredictable, but I will say mature bucks almost always get the best bedding sites in every area.
For sure.
Um, I mean, there's prime spots in every area, wherever there's whitetails for the most part. There's prime spots where a deer is going to feel most safe and most secure. A lot of times there's a good food source in there. There's just makes it the perfect world. And that's generally where your most dominant deer, which are your mature bucks, that's generally where they're going to bed.
For sure. And to your point, when people do spook them, or maybe they're like, "Oh, I don't see this buck for 4 days on trail camera," I think a lot of times we don't understand that sometimes those bucks will go around the camera and you can't see, obviously, the whole peripheral of the tree, and maybe they are there, or maybe they are leaving, and you're only getting nocturnal pictures for a reason because you're not in the right spot. Do you see often that bucks go nocturnal, or do you think that's a myth?
Um, there's no deer or no buck that's 100% nocturnal. There are different times a year when bucks are extremely more active at night, and they move little throughout the day. I mean, bucks are moving even, you talk about like say like the early part of October, which in my opinion might be the time of year when bucks move the least in the daytime. I would say that time of year, bucks are still moving quite a bit throughout the day, but it's just in a small parcel. Usually in a bedding area. They'll lay for maybe an hour or so, and then they'll get up, browse around a little bit, lay in a different bed, but it might be in a 100-yard square throughout the entire day. That time of year, they're preserving a lot of calories, building up for the rut. So, it just depends on the time of the year in the scenario, or if there's a lot of hunting pressure in an area, they're going to be, a lot less active. But overall, I don't really believe in bucks being truly nocturnal. It's just different situations. They move a lot less throughout the day.
For sure. And when you talk about food sources, so for people that aren't from the Northeast or this part of the state in the big woods, we don't really have food plots, and I don't think there's any in New Hampshire that are on public land, like public cornfields that are devoted to like wildlife management, at least for New Hampshire. It's not like Iowa where you have some places where the state will like leave out cornfields or have that devoted to the deer, which would be nice because they wouldn't be just acorn fed.
Yeah.
I feel like we could have somewhat of the genetics if they got older and we had the precious food that other places have. But my question is, do you target just bedding and scrapes, or do you sometimes target in the earlier part when they might be still on a summer pattern, like white oak trees and other things that they're feeding on near their beds when they get up?
Yeah. Actually, the only time I hunt food anymore would be throughout the rut, which might sound, a little more uncommon. I don't hunt food early because our archery season usually starts the beginning of October.
Oh,
And it
okay.
seems like our daytime feed pattern starts to go a little more nocturnal on mature deer somewhere early to mid-September, sometimes a tad later, but rarely do I find a lot of mature buck activity in the early part of the season on a food source. Generally, the main feeding area is usually visited at night. So your best bet is to hunt around bedding that time of year, at least here. I think up your way, though, if I remember, you guys have archery season mid-September. Is that correct? Or
September 15th to December 15th. So
so
we get a first week, I'd say probably 2 to 3 days that you get a shot at an early season pattern, then it's gone. Because once they shed their velvet, it usually the latest I've seen one shed its velvet personally is like August 30th. But
Mhm.
I've also seen people, it's very rare, but you'll see people kill maybe a 4 point in velvet. But
Sure.
usually mature bucks are all shed out by then.
Yeah, I still think mid-September. It could be different up your way slightly, but you got a chance for a feed pattern in the big woods then. Then it just gets harder as time goes on. But I like food in the rut because does are always close to food. I may not be right in the food, but usually doe bedding is going to be close to a good food source. So that's probably my favorite time to hunt around food sources. I will say sometimes also like in gun season, if it's a non-pressured area, bucks, they start to want to rebuild their bodies going into winter after all the fat preserves have been burnt through the rut. Food can be good then. But overall, I'm probably more of a bedding, around bedding, not always so much in bedding, but hunting closer to those bedding areas for the most part year or throughout the season versus food.
I'm the same way, and I think anyone that starts hunting or sees videos, they get a false identity watching TV shows of like, oh, you can just sit on a food plot edge or a field edge and just see these mature bucks. And maybe there might be one guy that's never killed a buck in 20 years, and he might shoot one, but that's very rare that you're gonna have one walk out in the middle of the day in the big woods. You need to get closer to that bedding where he's move. Maybe it might take him 2 hours to move 300 yards or whatever the case may be. um what's the farthest you've seen a deer travel? Because I know you, how many trail cameras do you have? Like hundreds, right?
Yeah, I mean, last year we ran around 170, give or take. It fluctuates throughout the season, but I think at the most we had was 170. The least would be 150. And usually I will have, 100 or more even out year round. So we're
Wow,
pretty big on the trail cam game to say the least.
that's crazy.
Um, but
How late
yes,
do you keep them out?
how long do I keep them out, did you
Yeah,
say?
for shed season and stuff.
Yeah, like I said, usually, we'll probably have close to 100 out year round. Some of the areas are a little more remote, a little harder to get to. And also I've learned that I feel that the deer become more used to your cameras the longer you leave them there. So, but there's just a lot of different reasons too why I'll leave many of them, out year round. And I kind of touched on it quickly, but if you're running 100 some cameras and some of these are 1, 2, 3 miles back into areas, it's very tough to find the time and have the ability to just be moving them all in and out, every year. So I've got cameras that have been on a certain tree for probably close to 5 years now. So
Yeah,
that's just in the environment that I'm hunting and the situation that I'm in. Although I would probably recommend that in a lot of different scenarios, but I just feel that that's what's worked best for us.
yeah. So sorry, I kind of got on a tangent.
Uh,
What's the farthest that you've seen a mature buck travel from basic, even if it's at summer range to where someone's killed it or whatever the case may be? I mean, the farthest I've heard is 13 miles. That was the furthest one that I've heard of, but
Yep. I don't have any quite that long. I'm sure it's happened with some of the deer, that even live in my area. There was a certain deer that I had several years of history with. I actually named him Goliath.
oh,
Um,
I know Goliath. I've heard about him.
most years I would find his sheds. Was never very good at hunting him though. But the biggest reason why I struggled to hunt him was he had such a massive home range. And I'm not going to say that his home range was very expansive throughout the entire year, but through certain periods of the year, he'd wind up in places very far from the other. And like his summer to winter range was always 7 miles, and it actually took me a couple years to realize this was the same deer that I'm getting sheds from and getting pictures in the summer. First, I didn't think it was because it was 7 miles difference, but for a deer, really, I mean, even me, usually any day I go shed hunting this time of year, I'm doing 5, 7, 10 miles. So for a deer, that's really nothing. It's a little more uncommon though.
For sure.
I think most even mature bucks that I've gotten to know over the years probably have a home range of 2 or 3 miles. I don't want to say square miles. There's some of them seem to have an odd shaped home range, like almost like an S shape or a triangle. Like I don't really go by square miles, but
Yeah.
my point is, a lot of these deer for the most part, aren't living in one little spot. There's certain times of year though when they are using a smaller area than others. But big woods deer, for the most part, they tend to have a pretty wide home range. And so if I run into another one that had an expanse of that 7 miles, I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's more common than what we would think.
Yeah, I mean, this tiny little guy right here. So this is the genetics I was working with. This is a 3.5-year-old, and my neighbor just killed him at 7. And it seems like they don't really get big here until that 5, 6, 7 range, a little bit older than most places.
Sure.
Um, and that buck, I found this shed, let's see, 4 miles away, and I've got pictures of them for multiple years. And what I try to do is I don't necessarily use the trail camera data because I don't have cell cams. Um, for that year, I use them for the future. So I look at the temperature, I look at the wind direction if I can at the day, and then try to factor that into. I probably take it too far. I have like an Excel spreadsheet that I look at, like the temperature drops. And then there's certain days where I see a lot of activity from like the 4 years of trail camera survey that I have. So like October 5th or like the first new moon. Um, and then so like the 5 and 6 is when I've seen a lot of mature bucks in daylight, and then the 23rd through the 25th, and then of course November is a crap show. They're everywhere. But what are
Yeah.
specific things that you look for through trail camera data to help you in the future?
Yeah, for me, for the most part, I'm very similar to you, especially running so many cameras and having the guide business. I would see like trends every year. Like I'm like, what's going on here? You're going through camera cards and like, holy cow, this certain day. I mean, why were the woods on fire? And just day before, nothing was happening. So I started keeping track of that data, and I've been doing that for like at least 5 years now. Um, and I, like you said, the moon and different factors, wind shifts, they can all trigger movement. For me, though, and the deer that we hunt, have found temperature to be our biggest influence.
Same.
Um, in fact, like this past season, our best stretch of movement was roughly like November 13th to 20th, which is a little bit late. Some years our best stretch is late October, early November. Really, most years that's what it is. But I think one of the reasons why our best stretch of movement was so late this year was that was our best stretch of cold weather. We finally had like average temps in the 30s. In first 2 weeks in November for us, a lot of days mid 60s, even a few in the mid 70s, and it really seemed to bog our deer down. Like the rut's happening that time of year, but they're not ranging very far. And if
And
you're
it's
not
usually
in
at
that
night.
Yep. So that's what I've seen the most. Seems like I pay more attention to the temperature than anything else. Um, but just like you said, keeping track of all that data and learning from it is very important because there's different factors throughout the country that it's not just one thing. Or like I know I talked to a lot of people that hunt more farm and agricultural areas, and there's different factors that they see versus like temperature doesn't seem to be as big of an effect on their deer than like the deer that I hunt. So it's good to pay attention to what controls and has an effect on the deer in your area throughout wherever you're at.
100%. Yeah, I saw that when I went out to, I go to college in Idaho. I'm finishing up there, and a
Oh,
lot of
cool.
the whitetails there, since I've had the experience from here and also there, like I killed a 120-inch buck, and it was purely based off of I only had permission in that area. So like 90% of the deer in the area are killed on private land. That's just how the whitetail range is in the southern Idaho,
Hmm.
southeastern. It's all river bottoms and it's all private land. So because the mule deer and the other ones live in the sagebrush, but the whitetails very, very often will not go into those areas. They'll stay in the agriculture and the river bottoms. So you can keep a deer in a 50-acre parcel, not it's not too hard or uncommon to keep them in a small acreage. But I got permission to this place, but I couldn't go on any of the sides of it, I could only hunt in the field. So that made it extremely difficult because you couldn't use a tree stand. I had to hunt from the ground. Um, and basically there's little things to hide in. So I basically hid next to a water trough to kill it. And basically a little kiddie pool and put it up sideways and hid to the side of it. Um, and the only reason I think I killed him is because whenever it was foggy, and we got a couple stretch of days where it was fog, I saw like a ton of bucks. Like I would see bucks, but they wouldn't come out in the field. They'd just pop their heads out or run out chasing a doe and then chase back in. But this one came beeline straight across the field right at me, and it was a perfect situation. But obviously, I wouldn't have hunted that way if I had the opportunity to hunt in the woods. I would be hunting in the bedding area or other places. But I thought that was interesting. It didn't really care. They didn't really care about the temperature as much as being able to see and having that security cover to walk out in a field.
Yep. No, that's what I mean. Wherever you're at in the country, there's going to be different factors. So that's why it's just like I brought up earlier, it's extremely important to note what you're seeing, try to record data. That way each season when different things come at you, you're going to be more prepared to react and understand what you got to do.
100%. And when it comes to being a guide, do you get to hunt often, or are you mostly just putting other people on the deer? How does that work?
Um, yeah, for archery season, I do get to hunt, or for the most part, I get to hunt very often, probably more than the average person. But what I, and I'm not complaining, but my situation is like the quality of my hunting seems to be like dwindling down because there's always like you're always scouting and finding someone else the best spot, and so it's always hard to ever really find time to really focus on myself. Like I'm just kind of winging it or getting on something real quick. In
Yeah,
the big woods, sometimes just to get on something good might take you all day, and if I got 5, 6, 8 clients, it's extremely difficult for me to do that. Now, what I did this a little bit last year. I'm going to do this even more. I am going to save a few areas just for myself. Just my own cameras, my own certain spots and even some more cell cameras. I have some areas we don't have the best cell reception overall here, but
yeah, neither do we.
I guess my point is like, and I'm not trying to sound greedy, but I do want to I just want to, as a hunter, I love guiding and I'm very fortunate, but I still do love hunting more than that. So I'm trying to put myself in a little bit better position, but not have it be an effect on my business as well. So, definitely going to do that a little bit more this upcoming season. Hopefully it pays off. But really, I mean, just being able to be in the woods as much as I am, it's not like I'm working a 9 to 5 job and only get out there on the weekends. I still have it better and I'm more fortunate than most guys. So certainly I'm not complaining.
For sure. And I think that is definitely a different perspective because people don't understand with guiding, like you are limited on the things, and when you do have a good spot, you often want to put your clients on it because the hunting is hard in the big woods, and it's probably hard for you, especially compared to like Iowa or something, to give expectations to a client. Do you have like a
A
guarantee,
guarantee,
or
or
how
how
does
does
that
that
work
work
for
for
you?
you?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely no guarantee.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
No, it's it's I don't want to say like I mean I feel our success is decent. It's usually around 30 some percent every year. And most people they're somewhat picky. Like I'm not saying we're dropping 150s left and right, but most people are looking for a mature deer to say the least. A lot of people are looking for something maybe around 120 inches or better. Uh, there's a lot of people that are, could say like in Pennsylvania, we have an antler restriction where it has to have 3 points on one side. I mean, a lot of people are passing those deer up. So it's really based on the hunter standards too. But overall, I still think we have a decent success rate. When everything lined up right this past season, we had a lot of success, but unfortunately, there was a lot of periods when we have brutal weather, like I said, first 2 weeks in November, and that's usually a big time like kill period, harvest period for us. And I feel bad. A lot of our hunters didn't have good action packed hunts like they should that time of year. So, I mean, that was kind of disappointing last year. But overall, like I said, I'm still happy with the success that on average I have every year. A lot of returning clients, which is a good sign.
That's good.
People aren't going to come back if they're not having a good time. So, but in the big woods, and people also, you know, you as a guide, you try to beat it in their heads and in their brains rather than like you know, brag them up and get them too confident. Like, this is big woods, this is public land, there's difficult terrain, this is not your average hunt. If you just want to guarantee and be able to just go in the woods 100 yards and be on a great spot, like, I don't think this is the kind of hunt for you. But anymore, there's a lot of people just looking for something different, a little more of a challenge, maybe a little bit more adventurous and realistic as far as hunting goes. And so I think the hunt that I offer is still pretty interesting to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think people want to experience the toughness, I would hope.
Yep.
Because for me, I think growing up in New Hampshire, where killing a one in the area I live in, if you're not big woods tracking with a gun, it's extremely hard to kill a 120-inch deer with a bow. Like, it's
Sure.
extremely difficult, and
Sure.
especially on public land. Whether that's going back in 2 miles deep into a swamp or taking a canoe or a kayak to places, different islands, or whatever the case may be, you need to get away from that hunting pressure. But then I'll go to Massachusetts, and I went on Onyx, literally scouted, and then found this huge 3 point. And I'm like, what the heck? This was easy. Because I just basically went into a field, and there's a lot more suburban deer, so they tend to get the age structure.
Yeah.
Um, and we only have like 8 more minutes left on this timer, but what I wanted to ask is, with the antler restrictions, when did that change? And um, have you seen that that's worked? Because for here, a lot of people, it's brown, it's down. So if I pass 10 bucks and they're all under 8 points, oftentimes probably I'd say 40% of those are getting killed.
Yep. Yeah, the our antler restrictions are I can't even fully explain how successful they have been. I would say, like, you know, back in like the late 90s and even earlier than that, but I started hunting in the late 90s as far as like being able legally to hunt. My first couple years I hunted, like, you would see all kinds of deer, but if you saw a spike or any horns at all, like, it was a big deal. Like, everybody for the most part was shooting anything with antlers. And really that's why we didn't have, you know, any mature bucks, or hardly any mature bucks running around, because that was just the standard. You know, there was a lot of people hunting, and nobody's passing anything up. And then when they changed that, and they also they harvested a lot of our does at the same time. It was kind of like introduce this antler restriction and then reduce the deer numbers, which created more habitat, more food, and more quality deer. So there was much better nutrition in the woods. And that combination started to really show itself in like just a few years. Then another thing that, in my opinion, had an effect was a decline in hunters, which is not good in every way you look at it. But so when you throw less hunters, less people out there hunting, now you got an antler restriction, less deer, better habitat. You know, within 5, 7 years, it was just like jaw dropping some of the bucks that we started to see. Never expected to have the deer that we have now. And I definitely credit that a lot to the antler restriction, because it I mean, for the most part, a three on one side really only gives a deer maybe the chance to become a 2 year old. But also think of it as like in the big woods, especially like a gun hunter, you can't just shoot because you see a big frame of antlers. You got to make sure you count 3 points on one side. And
Yep.
a lot of times you can't see, you get a glimpse of the antlers, you might lose the deer completely, or then you can't see its head. and a lot of deer get away from it. So overall, it just kind of spiked into a scenario that it wasn't just one reason why Pennsylvania started to have big deer. The antler restriction was part of it, but just blew up into a lot of different situations that really just, I actually know the guy, his name's Gary Alt,
Area.
that
Okay.
really created the antler restrictions. He actually had dinner at our camp this past fall, and they never even him and his fellow workers, like they never planned on having trophy bucks in Pennsylvania like that we have now. They just didn't want to be the state, honestly, that shot the most year-and-a-half-old bucks. They just wanted to make a little better quality, and it just blew up into something no one ever expected it to. And there actually is quite a few people that are disappointed with it, but most people anymore, like, who doesn't like big bucks? So
Yeah.
I'll I'll I'll
No, no
definitely be
more
okay
death
with.
threats for him, hopefully.
Yeah. There's a lot of old timers that got pretty upset about it, but overall, everyone's pretty pleased with what we have here, and I don't think anyone would ever like to see it change and go back to what it used to be.
Yeah, I think if we had the same numbers as Pennsylvania as deer, like we just don't have as many like per square. Like I'll give you an example. I went out driving yesterday around sunset and I covered about 20 miles and like checked every single field known to man, did not see one deer.
Yeah,
Like I've been to Pennsylvania and I went out and like when people are like spotlighting or like whatever the case may be legally and there was like 40 deer. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is just different. And I don't know why that is because we're not that far away. But my
right.
neighbor even owns some land in Pennsylvania and they only own a couple acres, but like some years the rut will be so hot for him and he'll see like a million deer and even see like
Yeah,
a pregnant doe have milk in the scrape, like stuff like crazy stuff, stories that I've seen like that. But
yeah.
it's pretty cool. Have you seen that maybe the elk will affect the amount of food for the deer because they
Um,
introduced them?
no, I think they have a pretty good judgment and plan on managing the elk and the other game that are living within them. I don't have elk where I live. They're about an hour away from me.
Okay.
Um, but I'm not too worried about that. Like I said, I think they've taken it pretty seriously. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard they're starting to hunt the elk that are here. They're starting to manage the herd. So I think having the elk's a good thing, and I think it's not having any effect at all. From at least I haven't heard any issues that it's having a bad effect on the whitetails within them.
That's good. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for jumping on. I know it's not too long. Maybe we can get you on another time, but I really appreciate
Sure,
the effort that you made to hop on short notice and be able to give your expertise. I mean, if you guys haven't checked out his channel, I don't know what you've been doing. He's got a lot of good content online. Super humble guy. He kills big bucks and he helps other people do it. So you got to check out his trophy room. I know you got a little episode on Exodus whitetail cribs. You got all sorts of stuff that they can check out the years of history and some people, I
sure.
think, they miss out on those deer camps and all those things that they didn't grow up with. Like I didn't grow up hunting, and that's something that I've been able to introduce into my life. So I'm super, super blessed that we still have this in our country because I know a lot of people don't get that opportunity across the states, whether they don't have it in their family or maybe the state doesn't have the best opportunity. Is there anything you'd like to say to promote your business or anything before we close?
Well, first of all, yeah, thanks a lot for having me. It certainly wasn't any bit of a chore or lack of desire. I'm always open to share any knowledge or my love for hunting with on a podcast or any other platform. So definitely just a big thanks for having me. I hope your listeners enjoy it. And they can, if they are interested, find me on social media, Sherk's Guide Service. I have Instagram and Facebook. I don't have a website anymore. It was just too much for me to handle, but feel free to look me up and shoot me a message if you're interested. And like I said, if we get some free time, which I'm sure I will, and I bet you will, I'll be glad to have another great conversation with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Go pick up your son and then get out in the woods to shed hunt.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Alrighty. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Alrighty, guys, that ends another episode on Bows, Bros, and Bucks. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you guys love this awesome chat with the Big Woods Bucks legend, Steve Sherk Jr. Thank you so much for watching.